Hello, it is a now 50-year-old Josh, and actually almost all the board gaming I did in the month of April was over my birthday weekend. There was one other game I played with my kids on a different weekend, but all the rest was done over my birthday weekend. And with my 50th approaching, I was trying to decide what really special thing I wanted to do to celebrate, and ultimately I just decided I don't want a party, I don't want gifts, any of that stuff. All I want to do is spend time with my very favorite people on the planet, my 2 kids and my 3 brothers, and just chill and play some games and have a good time. So that's ultimately what I ended up doing. I have 3 younger brothers. The 2 that live farther away came and stayed overnight so that we could get lots of gaming in over a space of 2 days, and then my 3rd brother came for the evening as well to join us for some fun. The quote of the weekend came from one of my younger brothers who said, "You know, I was sure that the 2nd oldest brother would be the first to make it to 50 years old." And yeah, I mean, I don't know how many of us expected me to make it to 50. I've cheated death a couple times, had some cancer cut out of my face, but here I am, still going at 50, still playing games. Before I get into the actual board games, I'll talk about the video games. And once again, most of my video game time has been taken up with Enshrouded still, to the point where it is now my #1 most played video game of all time. By the end of April, I think I had about 280 hours into the game. The one new thing I'll say about it this month is that with the most recent update, they did a few amazing things with the game, one of which related to the building aspect of the game. So Enshrouded is many things. It is an action RPG, exploration, craft building, survival based building game, but the crafting element is one that there is a huge depth to the amount of detail you can put into building things in the game. And it's not one that I've focused much time on, but I have in the past enjoyed just going on YouTube, checking out videos of people's builds, the incredible buildings and full towns that people have built in this game up from scratch, and all the creativity and wonderful use of the crafting system they've done. But with this most recent update, they have now added a feature where you can sort of upload your world into the system, and now players can look through the available worlds that they can check out, and they can actually go into other people's worlds with their character and literally just walk around their worlds and see what they've built. And so it's really amazing. You can't interact with their world in any way other than opening and closing doors. You can't take things, pick things up, break things, any of that. All you can do is walk around and look. But it is way cooler than just checking out a YouTube video of somebody's build, because you can actually get in there and walk around, and people have done just the most incredible things. People have recreated Rivendell and also the Shire and other recognizable IP locations, but then they've also done their own just purely creative worlds too, and you can just walk around and see the incredible creative beautiful work that people have done, and so that's really cool. What an interesting feature that they've added to Enshrouded, to just appreciate the time and effort people have put into their building in that game. In terms of board games, I did acquire a couple of things, and so I do want to give a huge thank you to my Patreon supporters who give me the budget to be able to treat myself to the occasional game here. I picked up a few promos in particular. So on the BoardGameGeek store, a couple of promos came up that prompted me to pull the trigger and make a purchase there. Even though shipping from the US to Canada kind of sucks, I decided that there were enough promos that I could put them all together for a shipment. And so I ended up getting 2 promos for the Lord of the Rings Duel for Middle-earth, which is 7 Wonders Duel recreated in a Lord of the Rings theme and simplified. And as you probably know if you've seen past videos, I really enjoy this game. So I picked up the Shire promo tile and the Grand promo tile for that game. And in doing so, I realized I'd been playing these location tiles incorrectly. I was confused by reading the rules of these promos until I realized that what I had been doing was I had been laying out 3 locations, and I had just had those 3 locations for the entirety of the game. But what I didn't realize was that if players purchased a location, they were supposed to be refilled back up to 3 at the beginning of the next age for age 2 and age 3, and not just kept at 3 for the entire game. So one little minor rule error I'd been making came up as a result of picking up these promos. A couple other promos I picked up were for War of the Ring, one of my all-time favorite games, certainly the biggest, most rules-heavy game I own, and that I haven't played in years and years. But I did pick up a promo called The Seeing Stones, which adds a few cards, and another promo called Warriors of Middle-earth, Tidings Not Burdens Mini Expansion, which is also a promo that added a couple cards. But turns out that that particular promo might just be mainly a joke. It's something to do with just riding the eagles or something that they threw in there as a bit of a joke. It's supposed to be playable with the game, but I noticed after the fact that its rating doesn't indicate that people think very much of that particular promo, so I kind of regret picking that one up, but it was just a few bucks anyhow. And then besides the promos, I did pick up a full game from a bookstore. I just stumbled across this game when I was checking out some books. Did I just shout books? Can't control the volume of my voice. Anyways, I was in the bookstore. I saw that they had Hot Streak on the shelf there, and this is a game that I had been looking for in my local game stores and whatnot, and it hadn't been available every time I checked. So I was excited to stumble across it in the bookstore, and so I did pick myself up an actual game besides the handful of promos there. As for the games I played, again, almost all of these happened over the course of the weekend that I was celebrating my 50th birthday. I'll go through these games in order of my lowest rated game to my highest rated game, starting with a game called Celestia. So my youngest brother is also of my 3 brothers, the one that is most hardcore into modern board gaming as a hobby. My second youngest brother enjoys playing games, but isn't necessarily the type to have an account on BoardGameGeek and follow the hobby all that closely. And then the next older brother isn't really into games at all. But anyhow, my youngest brother brought along Celestia with him for the weekend, which is a very simple push your luck style game that sort of reminded me of a game I had played in the distant past called Diamond or Ink and Gold, in that it works very well with a small group of players, and players, as they're going through each journey in the process of the game, they're deciding whether to stick it out a little while longer or bail and get some rewards. I do tend to really enjoy push your luck style games, and this was definitely a fun one for 5 or 6 players in particular, I would say. We did play with 5, and I don't think I would want to play it with fewer. 5 seems to be really an ideal number for this game. So we knocked off 3 quick games over the space of about 45 minutes. Certainly enjoyed it. I rate the game 6.5 out of 10. Evan, my older son, rates it a 9 out of 10. My younger son, Wyatt, an 8.5 out of 10. And my brother, who brought it with him, rates it a 7 out of 10. Next up was the last game we played of the weekend, just another quick card-based game. And this is Council of Verona, 2nd edition. This 2nd edition includes the Poison expansion, which I feel like adds some fun to the game. But this is a very simple but quite clever little card game that allows you to be very sneaky. And I do enjoy being sneaky in a game. Essentially, you're playing cards to a couple different locations and then playing influence tokens secretly face down on the cards that you're most often hoping to gain points from at the end of the game, but sometimes your tokens are doing other things such as poisoning characters and so forth. So very, very fun little game, but unfortunately it's one of those games that I tend to enjoy more than other people, because I rate the game a solid 7 out of 10. My older son Evan gave it a 5 out of 10, Wyatt only a 4.5 out of 10, and my brother a 7 out of 10 as well, like me. Next one is the one game that I played on a different weekend with just my 2 kids, and we got back to The Hobbit there and back again. This time we played Scenario 3 as we continue to work through the scenarios in the full campaign, and it ended up being a pretty close score. Once again, my older son Evan won the game, and again, Evan is somebody who is just constantly evaluating the scenario from the very beginning to figure out where the most points lie, to develop a long-term strategy to get there, and then following through. And he pays such close attention to the detail that at one point, my youngest son accidentally scooped up the dice. It's a roll and write game, so you roll dice, take turns choosing dice to write something on your own little board. But Wyatt accidentally scooped up the 4 dice after only one had been chosen, thinking that it was his turn to roll. But Evan knew right away what the four sides of all the other dice were, so instead of having to re-roll them, we could just reset them to what they were before. So that's just the kind of mind for detail Evan has, and both boys are still loving the game. I rate it a 7 out of 10. Evan gives it a perfect 10 out of 10, and Wyatt gives it an 8 out of 10. Getting back to the birthday gaming, this is a game that we played with all 6 of us who were present. Me, my 3 brothers, my 2 kids. And this is Flick 'em Up, a game that I have had on the shelf for years and years. I really only played it a couple times when I first got it years ago and haven't played it since. So one of the goals I had for my birthday gaming weekend was to get games to the table that either I've been really eager to get to that have just been sitting on my shelves unplayed since I purchased them, or get to games that have been sitting there for years, like Flick 'em Up, to see if they're games that I still want to keep, or if they're going to end up in the auction pile. So we played 3 quick games back to back of Flick 'em Up. This is, imagine taking the game Crokinole, where you're flicking discs, but you are cowboys on a table with terrain. You're shooting small discs as bullets against the other cowboys. You're flicking discs to move your cowboy and trying to accomplish various goals and so forth. So in that sense, it's very much a dexterity game based on flicking. I did simplify a couple of the rules very slightly so that we could just get to the flicking fun as fast as possible. I also used a bit of blue tack to affix a bunch of the obstacles to the tabletop so they could present true obstacles to our flicking around them. It was an enjoyable time. I rate the game an 8 out of 10, but unfortunately Evan didn't think much of it. He only gave it a 5 out of 10. Wyatt gave it a high 9.3 out of 10, and then my youngest brother, again the big board gaming fan, gave it only a 6 out of 10 as well. So I don't know if I'm going to keep Flick 'em Up. It might end up on the for sale pile, and I'll just maybe keep Crokinole around as my flicking fun game. Moving on to the game that was kind of my biggest goal for the weekend, in that I have had this game sitting on my shelf for years and years. I have had it in the back of my mind that this could be an all-time favorite when I finally got to it, and it ended up being great, but not an all-time favorite. This is Warhammer Underworlds Nightvault. This is Games Workshop taking their Warhammer fantasy figures and making kind of a board game out of them instead of a strictly minis wargaming type of game. In the past, I had picked up all available factions for the Nightvault chapter of this game, so I have a total of 8 factions, the 2 that came with the base game plus the 6 extra factions, because everything had gone on half price after a period of time. Because with Warhammer Underworlds, they have 11 or 12 different, I don't know what they call them, sets or whatever. Shadespire was the first set. This one that I have, Nightvault, was the second set. And then, like I said, there's been 8 or 9, 10 more, I'm not exactly sure, released after that. So anyways, I got them quite cheap, and what was holding me up was my painting. I'm such a slow painter, and I really wanted to get at least 2 factions of figures assembled and painted, and get all the extra terrain pack that I purchased painted up as well, so that it would all be looking nice, ready to go. And so leading up to my birthday weekend, I spent hours just hammering this final paint job in of the terrain, and as well as creating some detailed player aids to make the gameplay experience as smooth as possible. And I did finally get everything all set up in time for the weekend, and this is one that I just played one-on-one with my younger son Wyatt, who is super into the whole Warhammer 40k lore, and this actually prompted him to get more into the old world fantasy, what do you call it? I can't remember exactly what they call their old world stuff now, but it is a relatively straightforward board game because it's played on a hex grid board. So in that sense, it really simplifies these giant minis war games that Warhammer is known for, and makes it a very approachable, very quick playing. It only takes about an hour to knock off a head-to-head duel of 2 factions. And one thing about the factions is that they are very asymmetrical. Each faction's characters have special abilities. And what's really cool about the game too is it's all based around, a lot of it's based around card play. So each faction has a series of decks that you can pre-construct for the faction that involve goals that they can work towards victory, as well as other cards that give them special powers and so forth. So there's a lot of asymmetry and a lot of leeway in how you want to construct your decks and so forth for your faction. So it ended up being great. Wyatt instantly loved this game, which made me super happy, and he immediately wanted to dive in and start helping me paint some of the factions that I haven't got painted yet. Like I said, I only painted 2 of the 8 factions so far. So Wyatt immediately jumped in and started doing some painting. He was online looking at the various factions, reading up on lore and all that stuff. And in this first play of the game, Wyatt was playing Thundrix Profiteers. So this is the warband that actually prompted me to get into Warhammer Underworlds Nightvault, because I saw this warband of steampunk dwarves and I was like, come on, steampunk dwarves, I got to get into this. So Wyatt played the steampunk dwarves, Thundrix Profiteers. I played a warband called Ilthari's Guardians, which are these sort of forest spirit elves, and Wyatt's Thundrix absolutely destroyed me playing as Ilthari, but we had a lot of fun with the game. Like I said, it was a big hit with Wyatt. I rate the game 8 out of 10, and it certainly gains points for the peripherals of the game. The game itself is good. It's not super amazing, but the fact that it has such cool minis for the factions that you get to assemble and paint, the fact that it has this deck building aspect, these are things that really boost the rating a certain extent. So I give it an 8 out of 10. Wyatt gives it a 9.8 out of 10, and he doesn't put it in the top tier of his very favorite games, which include games like Hero Kids, the RPG, and that board game that him and his brother absolutely adore, that I'll have to put on the screen here because the name is slipping my mind. But 9.8 out of 10 for Wyatt. It's basically second tier, just beneath his all-time favorites, which was wonderful. We're definitely going to continue to, well, spoiler alert, for the month of May, we have been diving more into the game, so I'll talk more about it next month too. At another point in the birthday weekend, I had a chance to sit down and play a 2-player game with my youngest brother, and so I pulled off the shelf another game that's been sitting there for a long time called Akrotiri, one of those 2-player games that I absolutely love, and yet when I play this game with other players, the players that have been in the past, typically my most frequent gaming friends that I would play with, their brains were not necessarily wired for the type of spatial orientation that you need in order to play Akrotiri well. It has this kind of funny way of requiring certain spatial reasoning, because it's a tile laying game where you build out the board, and there are a couple of different things you're actually thinking about as you're building the board. You're building certain symbols that are going to help you discover temples, but you're also building routes to different islands. At the same time, it mixes in a bunch of other elements like exploration, route building, pattern recognition, economic management, market manipulation, and pick up and deliver. And it's all done in this very tiny little box, this little 2-player game that just mixes it all together so well. And like I said, it does require a certain kind of pattern visualization that not everybody's brains are geared towards. For whatever reason, my brain is geared towards it, okay? And I figured that my youngest son would be the same. My youngest brother would be the same, and sure enough, it totally clicked with him as well, and we knocked off a game in record time. I think we've finished a game in less than 45 minutes, which in the past, when I played it with opponents who struggle with this sort of spatial pattern stuff, it is certainly taking a lot longer than that. But I rate the game 9 out of 10, and my brother rates it also a 9 out of 10, so it was definitely a hit with him too, which I was quite pleased about. It's designed by Sen-Fung Lim and Jay Cormier, and Sen is a relatively local game designer who is also just a really fantastic person. So yeah, Akrotiri, great game. Now the top 2 of the month, we have another of the 2 games. So I mentioned Warhammer Underworlds Nightvault as being one of those games that's been on my shelf for years and years that I was really dying to get to. This also fits that category. This is 878 Vikings Invasions of England, and this is part of a series of games that I had played starting way back in 2012 with a game called 1812 The Invasion of Canada, and then after that I had played the next game in the series called 1775 Rebellion, and I actually owned that game for quite a while until 878 Vikings Invasions of England came out, and I sold 1775 and replaced it with 878 Vikings. And so this is the game that I had sort of built my weekend around. This was going to be the main event where I played it with my 2 sons and my youngest brother, who is the hobby board gamer. Although my one other brother did kind of participate in that there So what's cool about this game? There's so many cool things about this game, but one is that it is a team game. It's a 2 versus 2. We have 2 Viking factions that are invading England, and there are 2 English factions trying to defend England from the invading Vikings. And then there's also this kind of 5th side faction that pops in to help out the English occasionally, called the Fyrd, which are the sort of locals who get called up in arms to deal with the invading Vikings. And so my other brother that came to stay overnight with us did participate a little bit by pulling a card for the Fyrd every time they came into battle and then rolling dice for them. So the way I divided it up was, it was me and my youngest son Wyatt against my older son Evan and my youngest brother. And one reason I did that was because my older son Evan and my brother have very, very much the same kind of board game brains, in that they are both super logical. Like I was saying earlier about Evan and the way he approaches the Hobbit there and back again, they are very strategic minded. So they look at the game, they look at the overall systems and try to come up with a long-term strategy for success. So they both have that highly logical, highly strategic brain, whereas me and Wyatt are more the agents of chaos. Myself, I like a more tactical approach to games than a strategic approach, where as the game shifts and changes and things evolve, I can adopt my strategy and change things over time to meet the new conditions as they arise, and not necessarily have a huge grand strategy. Well, I mean, typically that's in the background too, but I'm in a sense more tactically focused, which, come to think of it, I think serves me well for my paramedic career, in that I was having to think fast and deal with rapidly changing situations all the time. But anyways, so I thought it was an interesting matchup. Me and my chaotic son Wyatt playing as the Vikings, coming in to take on the very strategically strong English. Another super cool thing about this whole series of games is the way that they incorporate theme with a minimal rule set. This is one of the best game series for encompassing the most theme with the fewest rules, and they do that by giving specialty dice to each faction, so that as they are in battle, each faction reacts slightly differently based on how dice are rolled. Each faction also has their own deck of cards that's played throughout the course of the game. And there's these other little things that really bring out the theme and the true differences between factions and the things that are playing out on the board here. So yeah, I love the team aspect. I love all the historical detail that's contained within these very simple rules. And ultimately, having finally gotten to sit down and play this game, I decided that I do like it the best of the 3 that I've played. It, to me, is the most dynamic and interesting, with the way that the Viking waves will come in, spread across the country, get taken out. The next Viking wave will come in, spread across, get taken out. And there's this sort of ebb and flow with the way the game evolves, and it's really cool. It also has all these expansion stuff that I picked up for it. Actually, one reason that it took me so long to get this game to the table was because I was determined to also get this game painted, because along with some expansion content, I picked up some enhanced components that include miniatures for all the leaders in the game, all the Viking leaders plus King Alfred on the English side, and then it also has these little buildings, churches and forts and stuff, and I wanted to get that all painted up before I got this game to the table. But then I realized the fact that it took me years to paint 2 factions for Warhammer Underworld Nightvault meant that it would be years before I probably get these things painted, and I was like, I just got to get this game to the table, because I knew it was going to be an all-time favorite. And we didn't even really get to any of the expansion stuff. It was kind of funny. In the back of my mind, I was like, for my birthday weekend, we could maybe knock off 2, maybe even 3 games of this. The first game will be a learning game with just the basic rules. Then maybe the second game will throw in just a couple of little expansion elements to mix it up a little bit. And then maybe on the third game, add a couple more. I didn't quite realize how long it would take to play this game. It took us 3 hours to play a full game. And so we only ended up playing 1 game of it, which was fine. It does have a lot of really interesting stuff going on with the expansion, in that there are lots of different modules that you can plug into the game if you want to mix up certain elements of it, and there are quite a lot of them, so that you can do a lot of really interesting things with the game. As a base game, I would rate it a 9 out of 10, but I think overall my rating is going to be a 9.5 out of 10 based on what I've seen in the Viking Age expansion content. In terms of what the other players thought, my older son Evan gave it an 8.5 out of 10, Wyatt an 8 out of 10, and then my brother also an 8.5 out of 10. So high ratings across the board. We obviously had a lot of fun with this as my main event game for my birthday weekend. But getting on to what ultimately was the most fun game for me. But before I get to it, I will say that this video is brought to you by the joy of not being sold anything. Stop purchasing junk. A simple life is a less stressful life. So my number one of the weekend was an amalgamation of two games that I've smooshed together into one make stuff up game. So I've taken Absolute Balderdash and combined it with Wise and Otherwise and made a game where players can make stuff up. Now, I've been a huge fan of Balderdash ever since I was a little kid and we played the dictionary game where you had to flip through the dictionary and find a word that nobody recognized, and then everybody writes their definitions and so forth. When Absolute Balderdash came out, which is also called Beyond Balderdash, it's weirdly is separated by two different entries on BoardGameGeek, which I don't think should be the case because they're identical games to the point where the Beyond Balderdash entry on BoardGameGeek has photos of Absolute Balderdash. But anyways, same thing. What it did was, whereas in original Balderdash you were just doing word definitions, Absolute Balderdash actually has 5 different categories that each card has 5 categories that you can pick from. You do have your word definition, but you also have a name of a person, and so players are supposed to write what this person is known for. They have initials, and players just guess what these initials stand for. They have a movie title, and players are supposed to give just a quick 1-sentence synopsis of what the movie's about. And then finally they give just a date in history, and players are supposed to put what important thing happened on this date. So it does add more variety in terms of the things you can do there. Like I said, I mix this together with a game called Wise and Otherwise, which is all about completing famous proverbs or sayings. So you might draw a card that says, there's this famous Indian proverb, the man who puts on shoes and then blank, and then players are supposed to complete the proverb. So very much in the same style as Balderdash, and the way I did it was I just allowed players to choose what game they were drawing their card from, and then if they drew from Absolute Balderdash, choose which category they wanted to do for that particular round. And then I just came up with a simple scoring system. One thing I did do as well as a little house rule was after the clue giver drew a card and chose the category, before they flipped the card to look at the correct answer, I allowed the clue giver to also write their own answer to participate in the round, and then they would look at the real answer, write the real answer on a sheet of paper, contribute that as well. And that way the clue giver could also participate in each round. And it worked super well. I just love being able to make stuff up and have a good laugh. I love writing. I love being able to use my wits a little bit and be kind of funny and just write silly stuff, and it's always good for a laugh. So I rate this game a 9.5 out of 10. This is amongst my favorites. Now apparently I was the only one of the people that I asked for ratings. Evan gave it a dismal 3 out of 10. Poor Evan, my logical kid, just isn't so much into the creative writing stuff. My younger son Wyatt only gave it a 6.5 out of 10, and then my brother, again another logical hardcore gamer, gave it a 6 out of 10. So I think I enjoyed this game a lot more than anybody else, but I was really excited to do it. It's the first time I've tried it with my sort of mashed together elements, and if I had to choose only one of those games, I would pick Wise and Otherwise, because it's more fun and funny to be able to complete these famous sayings, these witticisms or proverbs, than it is to, like, say, what do these initials stand for, that type of thing. But yeah, that was my month of April. Very fun 50th birthday weekend. I would love to hear, as always, what games you've been getting to the table. Are there any that you have been enjoying especially? Are there any upcoming titles that you're excited to get to? Please let me know. And regardless, I really appreciate you watching. Cheers. Hello, it is a now 50-year-old Josh here. Hello, it is a now 50-year-old Josh here. Hello, it is Josh here. Hello, it is a now 50-year-old Josh here, and Hello, it is a now 50-year-old Josh here. Hello, it is a now 50-year-old Josh coming to you. Hello, it is a... The quote of the weekend came from one of my younger brothers who was like, The quote of the weekend came from one of my younger brothers who was like, I would have sworn... The quote of the weekend came from one of my younger brothers who said, I would have sworn... The quote of the weekend was from one of my younger brothers, and he said, well, look at that. But a